Because, forces want to keep you to say, you know what, you'll never get married, you'll never get well, you'll never break this addiction. It would have happened by now. Those are lies from the enemy. You could be one day away. You don't know when God's going to turn that around, but I know this, when you believe God is faithful to His word. It may not happen on our timetable, but God knows how to get you to where you're supposed to be. Because it's easy to want to rely on others and, well, if my spouse didn't do this, then I'd be happy. If my boss would treat me better, if this pandemic, but you got to make that decision. Hey, this is the hand that I've been dealt today, and God, you've given me power over one thing, and that is my attitude. And God, I'm going to choose to rejoice. I'm going to choose to be glad. Even when David said that, this is another day the Lord has made, I'll choose to rejoice. He wasn't in a great time. He wasn't reporting. He was making a declaration of faith and said, you know what? Yeah, I got some things wrong, but I'm still going to choose to give God praise. I'm going to choose to be good to somebody. Really, those are seeds that we're sowing for God to change our attitude and change our circumstances.
I hear people say all the time, he made me mad or she made me mad. The reality is another person doesn't have that much power over you. You can make yourself glad in the Lord, and I appreciate your answer. It gives us a great perspective. I want to ask you this question. Think about what you and Pastor Victoria have been through and try to isolate for our viewers a time when you've really needed to exercise the power of hope. And I think I know what you're going to mention.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Pastor Rick, in my life is when my father passed. So I was working behind the scenes like these fine men and women doing the production and making my dad look good. And, I thought he'd live to be 100 years old. But at 77, he suddenly passed. And I knew I was supposed to step up and pastor the church, but I'd never faced that kind of challenge before. Every thought told me, Joe, you can't do that. You're a production guy. You've never been to seminary. And then even once I stepped up, Pastor Rick, there were other forces that, tried to stop, just critics and just other things. But you know what? I had to dig down deep and say, God, I believe this is something you put in my heart. I'm going to take this step of faith. And really, my attitude was, even if it doesn't work out, I'll go back to doing television production, but I'm not going to go to my grave not knowing what I could have become if I'd taken that step of faith and believed that God was for me. And as I launched out with that hope, knowing that God was in control, He's taken me further than I've ever dreamed. So I really believe, Rick, you can talk yourself out of your dreams or you can talk yourself into your dreams. There's these voices playing in our mind all day long, and sometimes it's negative. Joel, you can't be a pastor. Who's going to listen to you? And you haven't been to seminary. But I had to turn that off and just replace it with what God said. I'm strong in the Lord. Yes. I can do all things through Christ. God being for me more than the world being against me. Well, that's what caused that hope to come alive.
Sure.
And I think it's in all of us, but
yes.
We have to activate it.
That's exactly right. I think you've answered a portion of the next question, but I want you to continue elaborating because I sense everywhere I go, people want to hope. But for whatever reason, they say, but I can't, and this is the reason why I can't hope. And the tendency is to look at circumstances, to look at situations. So my question is this. My question is, what is it that prevents people from experiencing the power of hope, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think there's several things. I think sometimes we let disappointments and setbacks convince us that it's never going to change. It's never going to get any better. I think of the scripture in Exodus, it says the Israelites became too discouraged to believe. Well, they just kept thinking, we're never going to get to the promised land. Look how big these obstacles. We're out in the desert. Well, if you dwell on that negative all the time, you're just depressing your own spirit. So I think that's one thing. It's our thought life. That's where we have to turn up that, hope is in us, but we have to turn it up and say, God, okay, this seems impossible, but I know you can do the impossible. And I think another good thing too, Rick, is to go back and look at your victories in the past, because we've all had times where it didn't look like there was a way, but God made a way. When you realize, hey, God, you did it back then, you can do it again, but you do have to stir it up, because, forces want to keep you to say, you know what, you'll never get married, you'll never get well. You never break this addiction. It would have happened by now. Those are lies from the enemy. You could be one day away. You don't know when God's going to turn that around, but I know this, when you believe God is faithful to His word. May not happen on our timetable, but God knows how to get you to where you're supposed to be.
That's a good word, Pastor. That really is a good word.